This is a spiritual walk with Pastor Ju Un-chong. When a man and a woman meet, from that moment on, they are like travelers embarking on a long journey toward their destination, love. They are not stationary at any point, but rather in a constant process of moving toward love. Sometimes they climb steep mountain peaks, encounter endless cliffs, and sometimes encounter vast oceans and swirling whirlwinds. However, only by enduring this process can they reach the land of true love. When a man and a woman first meet, they feel curiosity. Without this curiosity, a relationship cannot develop. Next, a phase of mutual understanding begins. This confirmation is expressed through words, facial expressions, eye contact, and actions. Once this process of mutual exploration is complete, love gradually begins to ignite. Over time, the love between the couple intensifies. As love intensifies, the other's weaknesses become invisible. When you're in the thick of a relationship, even your partner's heels seem lovely. Even after a long day of dating, you long to hear their voice again. And then you call. Oh my, honey, I love you. But the strange thing is, even after talking all night, you still miss them the next morning. How wonderful would it be if these dreamy moments of the prime of life lasted until the day you die? But sadly, love has an expiration date. Research shows that when a person falls in love, the body releases hormones called dopamine and phenylethylamine. These are substances that induce excitement and euphoria. Unfortunately, these hormones stop being released around 18 months. This means that after 18 months, the mystery, excitement, and euphoria that come with just thinking about the other person fades. In Korea, this period of falling in love is expressed as sesame seeds are falling. Anyone who has ever shaken sesame seeds in the countryside will understand this expression well. If you dry the cut sesame seeds thoroughly in the autumn sun and then tap them with a stick, all the sesame seeds will fall out at once. Human love is similar. After the honeymoon, a romantic relationship persists for a while. They seem perfect to each other, and they couldn't be more lovable. However, after the sweet period of attraction and infatuation passes, disappointing aspects of their spouses begin to become apparent, one by one. Unknown personality differences and conflicts begin to surface. This leads to arguments and fights, fueling a strong desire to change each other. Unable to ignore even the smallest things, they become angry and clash. This leads to frustration and disillusionment. This process typically lasts until the 3rd year of marriage. Couples who overcome their conflicts and differences establish stable marital roles. However, if they fail to overcome these conflicts, they no longer care about each other. In short, it's a Cold War. Even when they're together at home, there's no communication. They don't care where their partner is or what they're doing. A man working at a police station said, "I'm depressed. The picture of my daughter on my phone is so pretty, isn't it? How adorable. But my wife and I don't talk at all. As our arguments escalated, my wife wouldn't serve me food at mealtimes, and I, feeling hurt by asking for food, would go out and have jjajangmyeon instead. After a while, I don't want to go home right after work, so I wander outside, have a drink, and then go home." So, from the outside, they appear to be maintaining their marriage. However, internally, they've started to sleep in separate rooms, stop talking, come home later, and live like strangers despite living under the same roof. This man, too, maintains a seemingly ideal marriage, but his heart is disconnected from them. This stage is characterized by a lack of communication, silence, loss of intimacy, and a false sense of closeness intended to impress outsiders. In short, it's a stage of mental divorce. In fact, countless people live like this for years, just without a legal divorce. So, why do they fight? I want to change everything about my spouse to suit my taste. A 39-year-old mother of 2 jumped into the sea in Sokcho. A few days ago, after an argument with her husband, she committed suicide by jumping into the sea, leaving behind a few bottles of alcohol. Her departure wasn't entirely unfortunate. They met at work, fell in love, and married. However, their marriage was a series of arguments, culminating in their drowning. This woman's story isn't unique. Why do people meet for love, yet fight so fiercely? It's because the framework for marriage is different. So, what is that framework? An example is as follows. There was a man and a woman who studied abroad in the United States from Korea. He studied hard and earned a degree from Harvard University, and she also earned a degree from a prestigious university. They met while studying in the United States and married. However, things she hadn't realized before marriage slowly began to surface. In particular, in American society, husbands help their wives with household chores and go to the market together, but this man didn't help at all. He didn't even make his bed in the morning, and while his wife sweated in the kitchen, he just watched. After dinner, he sat on the sofa, reading the newspaper and watching TV, completely refusing to help her. His wife couldn't understand this husband. How could this be? She thought, and the urge to divorce surged within her. But her faith in Jesus kept her going. Then, on her father-in-law's 60th birthday, she visited his parents' house and discovered something surprising. He was exactly like her husband. He was a wealthy man from a rural area, with a plump and well-built body, while his mother-in-law was short and stooped. But when I woke up in the morning, my well-built father-in-law would slip out and my hunched mother-in-law would fold the blanket. Even when my mother-in-law worked in the kitchen, he paid no attention. It was a typical Korean family where men were dominant and women were subordinate. Having witnessed this behavior since childhood, it was only natural for my husband to do the same. Trying to correct this only led to fighting and no solution. However, during Family Week in the U.S., I attended a couples seminar with him, and my husband found healing there. He learned that he had to let go of what he had inherited from his parents. And they both began to make more effort to create a happy family. So why did this couple fight so constantly? Why did a marriage born of love end up in such a crisis? While many complex factors likely played a role, the most prominent one is that they grew up in family cultures where men and women held different positions. A man who has a father who disappears from his life when his father wakes up in the morning and ignores his mother's work in the kitchen, and a wife who obeys him unconditionally without saying a word, will then have this image of a wife who, like his mother, obeys him without a word. Even after marriage, this man naturally expects his wife to obey him without a word, just as his mother did. This will become the framework for his married life. Furthermore, unlike men, a woman who grew up in a family where her father silently obeys her mother's wishes and her mother is active will emulate her mother's image of a wife who dominates her husband. This image of a wife will naturally be projected onto her husband after marriage. Furthermore, this woman will expect and demand from her husband the image of a husband who obeys his wife that she inherited from her father. This is the framework for her marriage. However, her father often helped her with the dishes and played with the children, showing consideration for them. Consequently, the wife couldn't understand her husband's behavior, and their relationship was constantly rife with arguments. And then, they would often find fault with each other's families, saying, "What's wrong with your family?" For a deeper understanding of this framework of marriage, the book Crisis and Counseling from the Christian Healing Pastoral Research Institute is quite helpful. In it, Professor Jong Tae-ji says, whether two people will live happily in marriage or experience conflict can be easily predicted by looking at the framework of their marriage, that is, their love compatibility. If their love compatibility is mismatched, the husband will act like his father, being self-righteous and expecting absolute obedience from his wife. Conversely, the wife will expect her husband to be submissive and give in to her demands. This triggers a psychological war between the two, where they refuse to yield. Everyone initially resists giving in. This is a battle to maintain their composure, and depending on the outcome, one partner will seize the upper hand. Even in a couple's relationship, this psychological battle of energy can persist for a period of time, until one partner gives in and harmony is achieved. However, this harmony requires a certain degree of love compatibility. When their love compatibility is excessively mismatched, the conflict intensifies and escalates to uncontrollable levels. Jong Tae-ji, Crisis and Counseling, Christian Healing Pastoral Research Institute, page 172. Those who don't realize that the root of the problem lies in these different perspectives on marriage often assume the problem lies in the other person's personality. The problem is that they go to extremes. Some men, unaware of this, often call their wives "you lunatic" or "you crazy bitch." So, From the beginning of their marriage, the wife suffered emotionally and received psychiatric treatment. She even came to me, struggling to figure out what to do when she was asked to come to the hospital with her husband. Even though they had decent jobs by social standards, they fought fiercely. Just because the marriage structure is broken doesn't mean the person is inherently ill. It's simply because they unconsciously imitated their parents' behavior as they grew up. Therefore, those who realize that their own attitudes were unknowingly acquired from their parents in childhood and strive to change theirs will gain the ability to see the other person's perspective and accept their behavior. A woman's story. This is a woman's story. She and her husband had been married for 36 years, and their relationship was so strained that they barely had a day without fighting. They sharpened their claws and bruised each other's chests, often to attack each other. So, despite living together for 36 years, they felt no deep affection for each other. Far from affectionate, they harbored resentment. They couldn't even understand why they had maintained such a marriage. While traveling with friends, the woman finally decided to divorce her husband. Yes, it's not too late. Let's boldly divorce and find a new life for ourselves. This thought occupied her mind throughout the trip. Upon returning, she called her children together and shared her decision. All three of her married sons nodded in agreement. However, her youngest son, a college junior, expressed opposition. He asked her to endure until he was married. Only the youngest son, for selfish reasons, opposed his parents' divorce, and even the children did nothing to prevent the couple's breakup. The couple postponed the divorce because of their youngest son and continued their married life in a haphazard manner. Then, by chance, she attended a healing seminar. The 3-day seminar left her deeply shocked. The reason our marriage has been so unhappy up until now is because my husband and I refuse to accept each other as they are, instead trying to fit each other into our own standards and frameworks. In reality, they had been sleeping with the enemy for 36 years. The husband and wife, in their own ways, were angry and critical of each other for not conforming to their own standards, crippling each other's pride and preventing them from maintaining a healthy marriage. And when they tried to end this long-standing conflict through divorce, the obstacle of their youngest son stood in their way. That realization became a valuable green light for saving their family. She had noticed that the conflict they'd been having stemmed from her attempt to force her husband into her own narrow frame. Returning home, she opened her husband's room, which had long been a separate room, and quietly called him. He turned around nervously at her call. He knew that whenever his wife called, there was always something to argue about. "Why are you doing that?" Ignoring her husband's outburst, the wife lowered her voice and spoke in a gentle tone. "I've been thinking about it, and I realize you're much more capable than me." The husband was taken aback by the unexpected words spilling from his lips. "What are you talking about? You're much more capable than me, but can you forgive me for forcing you into my small space, tormenting you and forcing you to do what I want?" Her husband, who had been skeptical, stared at her with startled eyes. His expression was clearly suspicious. "Is that true?" "I really am. I'm truly sorry. I'll try harder from now on." That night, the two of them stayed up all night talking and gently embraced each other. That's right. It's impossible to fit someone else into your mold. Each person has a different personality, different thoughts, and different experiences. How could you possibly find someone who perfectly fits your mold? More than anything, no one can be perfect enough to be the standard for everything. Therefore, those who believe only those who fit their mold are right are destined to be lonely and unhappy.